Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for the day. We pray that you'll bless our time together. Pray that you'll always help us to keep in mind that you've not given us a spirit of fear, but of a sound mind. And pray that you always help us to be guided by your spirit in these what can only really be described as troublesome times. Bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, if you want to go, we're getting a little bit of a late start today, and I have an appointment that I've got to get to this afternoon. So I don't know how much I'm going to get through today. Obviously, I'm not going to get through everything that I did. I have a couple of long clips, and I may focus on those. I have like 3 of them that are kind of long. I preached first hour. Of course, I know it's hard to believe I went over a little bit. So I guess I can't blame anybody today for all of this that's on me. So one of the things, today we're going to talk about prophetic singularity. This is a word that I heard a lot this week, not prophetic, but singularity, because I think it's a very big issue with artificial intelligence and that sort of thing. Just a reminder, we talk about the convergence of events. And so I think the title slide today kind of starts to capture how we're kind of accelerating down to this singularity point. And that point is the return of Jesus Christ. There's a whole bunch of things that are going to happen before that, and they're going to be happening all at the same time. And so we're going to see a lot of things, and they're going to happen quickly. They're going to be converging. This is a slide that I use a lot of times. This is my grid acceleration, and we'll talk about this at the beginning. Things are happening very quickly in terms of Bible prophecy. And listen, how much of this stuff happens before we die or we're out of here otherwise, I have no idea. You don't know. We don't know. We can only talk about the things that we know that are coming and the foreshadows of things that we know that are coming that we're seeing manifest themselves in the world today. In terms of acceleration, Lenin once said this, and as best I can tell, this is an accurate quote of Lenin. There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. Now, I've heard that quote a lot over the last couple of years because it applies. There have been a lot of things happening over the last couple of years. So in the last couple of years, decades have gone by, it seems like. And I have some quotes today. Some of these are older clips, but I think they relate. I'm going to talk a little bit about, and we talk about the convergence of things. So I'm not the only one who uses the convergence idea. When people are talking about singularity, they're talking about all of these digital things, biometric digital ID, central bank digital currencies, and open like ChatGPT and artificial intelligence and technology and the development of information, the scope of information. I used to have this slide where I would show that, what used to be on your computer. I saw a picture of this truck. It was a semi-truck pulling up back in the 50s, and that was a 2 megabyte computer. And it filled a whole semi-trailer. It would fill a whole room. And now you run around with things in your pocket, and you complain, well, I only have 256 gigabytes of data space on that phone. And it's like, in fact, it was 30 years ago in March, I joined a firm, and I got my first desktop PC. It was a Intel 386 chip with 2 megabytes of RAM, and hold on to your hats. I mean, this hard drive was enormous. It was a 40 megabyte hard drive. I mean, programmers now don't even burp in 40 megabytes. Our whole network, we had about 80 people in the network. I was actually head of the firm's tech committee for a while. For a while, the entire network of 80 people with all their computers networked together had just over a gigabyte of storage space combined. It sounds like a joke now, and that's how we worked back in those days. But I'm not the only one who uses this convergence thing. This is a Canadian website, and they have a thing up called, an article there called Exploring Biodigital Convergence. This is the Canadian government talking about this because they're all trained in that. It says, and the article says here, or the website says, why explore biodigital convergence now? There are enough signals to give shape to potential biodigital futures. These signals suggest that biosciences and biotechnology may be at the cusp of a period of rapid expansion, possibly analogous to digital computing circa 1985. 1985 was with, I think, Windows 1.0 came out. I remember getting a cell phone. I think it was 1993 I got my first cell phone. And I remember all those times I was out of town. I remember sitting here at the rest stop at 36 and 71. There was a payphone there, a drive-up payphone, and sitting there talking on that phone for 2 hours sometimes, hanging out half of me hanging out the window. It's what you had to do. So remember that this whole thing too, though, is it's a birthing process, this end times birth pangs. And it's not a C-section. It's not over like that. It's going to take a while. It's going to be a lot of turbulence, that type of thing. And again, as we get closer, we'll have a better understanding of what's going on. That's what we refer to a lot in Daniel chapter 12. So I'm going to go through some things today, and these are not really well organized. I had about 20 or 30 slides that just sort of disappeared from my sermon that I had worked on, some great clips, and everybody's wondering, like, when would you have finished if you hadn't lost? That was an act of God that you didn't have all those. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, kind of jump around a little bit. This is an article from The Atlantic, how ChatGPT will destabilize white-collar work. It's going to change this convergence of artificial intelligence of what's coming. And it was a big topic at Davos. And in fact, maybe I can just go to that. I have a video on it here someplace. Good grief, where did that end up? Okay, so OpenAI, ChatGPT, and so The Atlantic, all these people are talking, what about this ChatGPT? It's kind of amazing. Like at the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania, they gave a quiz to ChatGPT-3. This is the third version of this that's come out. They wrote an article for it. It's at the Wharton University of Pennsylvania website. And it says here, OpenAI's ChatGPT-3 has shown a remarkable ability to automate some of the skills of highly compensated knowledge workers in general, and specifically the knowledge workers in the jobs held by MBA graduates, including analysts, managers, and consultants. And so, look, the white-collar elite people, managers, tech people, lawyers, we all think we're going to be passed over by this development, and we're not. At least I don't think we are. This was a little video on Fox News the other day, Mornings with Maria, talking about this. So here we go.
Welcome back. The artificial intelligence race is heating up. Microsoft announcing a $10 billion investment into OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT. Joining me right now is Hudson Institute Senior Fellow, Hudson's Quantum Alliance Initiative Director, and the former NSC Senior Advisor to Robert O'Brien. Arthur Herman is here. Arthur, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Myself and the team, we've been talking about ChatGPT, and we want to know more. Microsoft is pretty much going all in. This latest investment builds upon the company's 2019 and 2021 investments in OpenAI, Talk to us about open AI. Some of the leading minds in tech say that this is just game changing.
It is. I mean, on the one hand, it's a very simple AI program, really, in the sense that what it does is it generates, programs that are triggered by conversations with humans, and responds to their requests for tasks and for other sorts of issues that come up. I had my own experience, my own eye-opening experience with GPT. When I submitted 2 questions to it, said, write me 2 500-word essays on topics, one of them a rather technical term used in Pentagon procurement work, which is what I'm working on right now. The other one in ancient Roman history. And the answers came back to me, Maria, almost by return of email post. I mean, I couldn't believe how quick it responded with 2 essays. And I said, this has to be cribbed from somewhere. So I checked other sources, I checked Wikipedia, and sure enough, it had generated these things almost within the blink of an eye. But what's so interesting about this trend, and you mentioned the GPT passing the MBA exam at Wharton. What's interesting about this is that we're looking at a new phase in the information age. The old idea is that automation was going to replace all those blue collar jobs, right? That they would all be replaced by robots, and that therefore people whose jobs were under threat were America's working class. But what we're also seeing now is that there's also a threat coming, thanks to AI and programs like GPT. There's also a threat coming to white collar workers. That if you're a lawyer, if you're an accountant, Mark, if you're a financial planner, you might want to look to your laurels, because there may be a program coming, an AI-generated program, that's going to be able to do jobs just like yours, if it doesn't have your unique contribution or your unique brand that goes with it. And this is going to happen now also too within big tech.
Yeah, this is such a great point that you make, because all of this time talking about AI replacing things that we do, regularly, that the machine picks up, understands how you move, move cheeseburgers from one place to the other. No, this is replacing white collar jobs, those jobs that people get after years and years of schooling. What does that mean for college? What does that mean for university? All the money we put into university, if Chat GPT can do it. I mean, they are basically writing novels, and then humans are publishing those novels. What about that? A new research paper revealed that Chat GPT passed the MBA exam at Wharton Business School. Some people, they're writing the books using AI. So how concerned should people be after spending all of this money and time going to school and university and further university on top of that?
Well, I think what it means is that we're going to move to a different kind of credential society, because the idea that if you went to Wharton and got an MBA, that your future was secure, this may not be the case anymore. On the other hand, if you go to a Voc Tech college and learn how to handle machine tools or a welding job, you know what? Your starting salary is going to be probably in the low 6 figures, and your future may be replaced, because a lot of those kinds of tasks are much harder for current robotics and other kinds of automated systems to replace.
Yeah.
And for big tech, this may go a long way to explain why we're going to see also a shift in the kinds of jobs and hiring that takes place in big tech. There's been all of the major big tech companies have been cutting back on their workforce. A lot of it is, as you know, a response to the chances of a coming recession. They're sort of battening down the hatches here. But we're also not very far from where we're going to have AI programs that are able to do software coding, that are even going to be, and here's the next step, Maria, where you have AI programs that are designing other AI programs. And what's going to happen then is that a lot of the people we think of as, the key information workers at companies like Google and Microsoft and Spotify, they may find themselves competing with the machines in ways that their employers don't really notice the difference. And in fact, the machines are, a little bit more reliable. They're happy to work on weekends, a whole range of other things that are going to be very tough for America's white-collar workforce.
So OpenAI put out ChatGPT 3, and it's taken the world by storm. And I've talked about it a lot. It was a huge subject at Davos, and I've got tons of videos that I'm working through there. But when we talk about the singularity, if you remember, there were a number of years ago, this magazine actually came out in February 2011. And it kind of, for those of us who talk about Bible prophecy and stuff at the time, it was sort of like, this is what's going on. And it said 2045, the year man becomes immortal. Now listen, I don't think man will get there. That's just, I think there are some limitations put in place. But we know that, like at the Tower of Babel in Genesis, that there was this, we can be like God. And a lot of people are talking about that. And so Ray Kurzweil has a thing called Singularity University, and I think he's affiliated with Google. And they brought back, so Microsoft is putting $10 billion into OpenAI. There's a talk, I think I played last week from Davos, where the CEO of Microsoft said, yeah, I think his name is Nardella. And he said, yeah, we're incorporating artificial intelligence in all of our programs. Now, all of our offerings will use artificial intelligence. So there's this convergence. And so Kurzweil says, well, I'm doing this because I want to be immortal. I want to upload myself to the cloud so I will exist forever. Now, the question is, what happens as man tries to get to where they maybe can't go? That's the thing. And I think this does play into, this is really end times, Antichrist type stuff that we're talking about. By the way, 2045, they're not talking about 2045 anymore. They're talking about, 2030 maybe. Everywhere you go, they talk about 2030. Google, or this was a cover in 2013, about 10 years ago, can Google solve death? And this is not a fly-by-night magazine or anything like that. This is Time Magazine. So I went back and dug out some old videos, and if it's kind of enlightening and frightening at the same time. This is a guy named Sam Altman. He is one of the founders of OpenAI. And I think they might talk about this at the beginning of this interview. This interview is from October of 2018. Okay, so it's 4 years and 3 months ago. He was interviewed by Bloomberg Business. And by the way, one of the other founders of OpenAI, Elon Musk. Kind of heard of him, right? And so just listen to this interview. It's about 4 minutes long or so, parts of it, because it's very interesting.
I want to start with OpenAI because OpenAI was founded in part out of a fear that artificial general intelligence, or sort of superhuman intelligence, shouldn't be in the hands of any one company and was perhaps coming faster than we think. Is it really just right around the corner, or is it farther off than perhaps even you thought it was initially?
Well, I think it's a question of timeframes. Like, I view the next few decades for this sort of most important technological milestone in human history, I view that as right around the corner. And so the debate of, is it 10 years or 100 years, I don't think that matters too much given the magnitude of what's happening. Like, it's coming soon enough and it's a big enough deal that I think we need to think right now about how we want this deployed, how everyone gets the benefit from it, how we're going to govern it, how we're going to make it safe and sort of good for humanity.
Elon Musk, who founded this with you, has been concerned about the sort of apocalyptic possible future of AI. How realistic is that apocalypse?
I think it's always hard to say, like, when you have any incredibly powerful new technology, here's exactly how it's going to go. I will say that I am personally optimistic we are going to get to the good future, but I think that's going to require incredibly hard work from very talented people that needs to start now.
So how big a risk is it that that work doesn't happen, or that AI gets off track, or that AI supersedes human intelligence and then has a mind of its own?
People talk about sort of self-driving trucks and the impact that's going to have on jobs, and that's true. But what they don't talk about is all of the white-collar work that AI is going to do. My belief is that all repetitive human work that doesn't require the deep emotional connection between two people, that will all be done in the next couple of decades, better, cheaper, faster by AI. And that is somehow left out of the conversation. It's always about factory robots and self-driving cars.
What's overhyped?
The killer robots thing gets overdone.
No robots are gonna eat all our jobs or kill us, or...
Some robots will eat some jobs, and some robots will kill humans. You've already seen that with self-driving cars. But when you look at the trend as a whole, I think it's going to be incredibly positive for humanity.
But you do believe that AI can supersede human intelligence?
I believe it absolutely will. There's a big debate about timeframes, but I believe that, I think it takes like unique human arrogance to believe that AI cannot supersede humans.
But what about that scares you?
So many things, right? Like, this is like, you know, what does it mean to build something that is more capable than ourselves? Like, what does that say about our humanity? What's that world going to look like? What's our place in that world? How is that going to be equitably shared? How do we make sure that it's not like a handful of people in San Francisco making the decisions and reaping all the benefits? Like, I think we have an opportunity that comes along only every couple of centuries to redo the socioeconomic contract, and how we include everybody in that and make everybody a winner, and how we don't destroy ourselves in the process is a huge question.
Well, that's interesting. So this ChatGPT, I'm seeing rabbis, pastors, articles are written say, I went to ChatGPT. I said, write me 2 sermons on this subject and in the style of this pastor. It does it in seconds. And the people that I'm conversing with and reading articles about, they say, you know, it's actually not bad. It's passing parts of the medical licensing exams, law bar exams. I mean, we knew the lawyers were smart, right? But it just confirms my thesis. It's good to have that confirmed. But I don't think we really understand what all this is going to mean. Now, Sam Altman wrote an article for, it's at Moores, MOORES.SamAltman, ALTMAN.com. And it's called, and I didn't have time to put it up, it's called Moore's Law for Everything. Now, do you know what Moore's Law is? Moore's Law was developed in computer chips, and that computer chips would double in capacity every 2.5 years. And that's pretty much stayed the case for the last 30 years, which means computers have really gotten very powerful. And now they're talking about quantum computing, which will blow Moore's Law out of the water. But Altman wrote an article back in 2021 for his website. It says this: my work at OpenAI reminds me every day about the magnitude of the socioeconomic change that is coming sooner than most people believe. Software that can think. Now, put this in the context of the videos I've played you about from a guy named Yuval Noah Harari, talking about what are we going to do with people when they don't really have anything to add to society. And I'm sure if you talk to Harari, you would say, well, I'm always going to be there because I have stuff to add. I'm one of the really elites. That's why he talks about when things get really bad, maybe we need a Noah's Ark for the elites, even though he thinks all the Bible is a myth and it's fake news and it's made up stories. He'll use biblical imagery all the time. So he says, my work at OpenAI reminds me of the magnitude of the socioeconomic change that is coming sooner than most people believe. Software that can think and learn will do more and more of the work that people now do. More even more power will shift from labor to capital. If public policy doesn't adapt accordingly, most people will end up worse off than they are today. We need to design a system that embraces this technological future and taxes the assets that will make up most of the value in that world. In the next 5 years, computer programmers that can think will read legal documents and give medical advice. In the next decade, they will do assembly line work and maybe even become companions. And in the decades after that, they will do almost everything, including making new scientific discoveries that will expand our concept of everything. This technological revolution is unstoppable in a recursive loop of innovation, as these smart machines themselves help us make smarter machines will accelerate the revolution's pace. And so in 2021, almost 2 years ago, March 16th, 2021, he wrote this article. And one of the things he talked about is, well, if people can't do anything, we'll give them a basic income. And because this will make everything so wonderful in society that people won't have to do anything and it won't cost anything to live. So we'll give everybody $13,000 a year and everything will be great. And, you can go get your 3D printed steak delivered to you by drone. You don't even need to leave your house. It sounds very dystopian, but it's coming. It's coming. So this is a good article. You should go look it up. Now there's another article. Let me pull up my version of it so I can. This is the actual picture that's in the article. At Popular Mechanics. I mean, we're talking about Bible prophecy and stuff, so of course we're going to refer to Popular Mechanics, right? Now, this was just published this week, last Monday. So everybody's talking 2030. Now, I'm not date setting. I want that to be understood. But everybody's pushing 2030. And now here comes Popular Mechanics of all publications. Humanity may reach the singularity within just 7 years, trends show. By one unique metric, we could approach technological singularity by the end of this decade, if not sooner. A translation company developed a metric, time to edit, to calculate the time it takes for professional human editors to fix AI-generated translations compared to human ones. This may help quantify the speed. An AI that can translate speech as well as a human could change society. An AI that can translate speech as well as a human could change society. Now, I remember once I had a international trade dispute. It sounds pretty exotic. It was over unlicensed sneakers, tennis shoes. And I almost ended up in Korea, but some of the other guys in the case went. I ended up in Los Angeles to depose guys from the Korean company, and we sat in a conference room for 3 days, deposing them. They didn't speak a lick of English. They were smoking. This is downtown LA. This is 1992, I think. So 30 years ago, they smoked the worst smelling cigarettes I've ever smelled in my life. It didn't smell like they were made with tobacco. It smelled like they were made with something else brown that kind of dries and looks like tobacco. I had the worst migraine for 2 days. And part of the problem was we did it with a translator, an interpreter. So as I'm asking the guy a question, this guy sitting right here starts talking to him in Korean while he's listening to me and talking, like instantaneous. This guy was like a machine. Then the guy started giving me the answer in Korean, which I was listening to, but I'm not going to understand. But then he starts speaking to me in English while the guy's speaking in Korean. And I'm telling you, my partner and I, we kept switching off because it was blowing both of our brains. And we had the worst headaches. But now they're talking about this coming. And so what are they talking about, though? They're talking about reversing Babel. And you see the little things, the devices that you can buy. Take this to a cafe in Paris and you can order a latte in French. You tell you what it wants, you hold it up and it speaks French. And then the person responds, oh, would you like extra, I don't know what you get in a latte, I don't drink that stuff, but would you like extra chocolate sauce in your chocolate syrup? Is that not in a latte? Should be. Then I would drink it. And you can have a conversation almost in real time with someone. And do you understand the return to Babel thing that we're seeing on a technological scale? And so at what point, God intervened there. And I think we're at the stage where God's going to intervene again. And so what's the tipping point? What's the prophetic singularity that sort of, it converges enough that everything unfolds then, that we can see. And so here they're saying, 7 years. This is kind of interesting. I'm sure they're not Bible prophecy students at Popular Mechanics. And maybe they're just trolling us. They know what we think, and they're just trying to, look, watch all these guys. They'll go crazy with these prophecy updates if we write this article. Whether these hyper-accurate translators are harbingers of our technological doom or not, that doesn't lessen translated AI's accomplishment. An AI capable of translating speech as well as a human could very well change society, even if the true technological singularity remained ever elusive. Wow. That's it's such interesting stuff that happens. But it's going to have an impact on society. I've talked about this. China is having more deaths than births now. And somebody said, well, why do they have so many people? And the answer is because they're at the tipping point where they're going to decline rapidly, fairly rapidly. And that everybody's talking about this. China's declining. What's the impact of that? One commentator that I listen to occasionally says, you know what? He's a secular guy. I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, but he says, you know what? We don't have an economic model for what this means for the world and society. We've never had this in history. We don't have any experience with this. This is an article from, I think it's the New York Times. China's monuments of despair. You've heard about these big empty cities that they build? They're all over the place. Hundreds of thousands plunge savings into mortgage payments on homes and buildings that may now never be finished. And they're all over the place. Big cities that could accommodate 2 million people. There's nobody living there. This has been discussed for 10 years. But listen, it's sort of like Bible prophecy. It's like all this stuff is happening, and there are people going, what do you mean? What's happening? I don't see anything. Everything looks good right in front of me. Take the blinders off and look to the side a little bit. It's going to have an impact. This is a guy speaking in the Scottish Parliament. You've heard of all these 15-minute cities, 20-minute cities. Listen to what this guy's like in charge of the Scottish net zero program. He's like the minister of net zero. Listen to what he said.
On transport, our second strategic transport projects review, published just 2 weeks ago, confirms that the era of catering for unconstrained growth in private car use is well and truly over. The review follows the sustainable investment hierarchy, which aims to reduce the need to travel unsustainably and prioritises making best use of enhancing existing infrastructure before investing in new capacity. Furthermore, we have set out how we will reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030 in our draft route map, a truly world-leading commitment demonstrating our level of ambition in meeting Scotland's statutory targets. The Scottish Government have commissioned research exploring demand management options to discourage car use. And using the research findings, we will work with local and regional partners to develop a demand management framework by 2025.
Together. And so here's from their Strategic Transport Projects Review 2. And so they prioritize, this is the priorities: walking and wheeling, cycling, public transport, taxis and shared transport, private car. If you're allowed to have that. And so the dream seems to be you'll own nothing and be happy. Back to this demographic thing. China's population bomb blows as death outnumbered births in 2022. And then this from the Prime Minister of Japan. I've talked about this, and people write to me and say, you're out of your mind. This will never happen. They'll turn it around. The time to turn around their decline in China and Japan was 50 years ago. This has been building, and now it's going to explode. And so, listen, that's why the mullahs in Iran came out last fall in the Tehran Times and other newspapers and said, listen, we have had the fastest decline in female fertility rates of any society or culture in human history. And what does that mean? Seth Frantzman wrote a great article at Jerusalem Post about it. He said, what does it mean? And I agree with them. And I've said it before. Does this mean that China's going to try Taiwan? Iran's going to try to take out Israel? Because they want to leave their legacy. They know what's happening. The leaders of these countries are well aware of this. They're talking about it. Japan, for years in Japan, they've sold more adult diapers every year than children's diapers. It's crazy. I had a little quote here from a Twitter account. Oh, I don't know if I used this one last week or not. Google, somebody sent me this. Google this. Do men menstruate? I know there's some young teenagers. What's he talking about, mommy? Sorry, mom. Having a period is not a feminine thing. This is what Google says. This is artificial intelligence. Remember, it's artificial intelligence, not wisdom. Big difference. And people of all genders menstruate, including non-binary people, agender people, and even plenty of men! Exclamation point. Menstruation doesn't change anything about your gender. It's just a thing that some bodies do. Okay. And I guess that comes from www.transhub.org.au, Australia. Down under and under judgment, I think. So I'll talk a little bit about Davos. I find it interesting that, all the technocratic elites go there to talk about it, and they're getting watched too. I thought that was, see the cameras everywhere. But they live in their own thing. And I'll talk more about this in some updates, the global risk report, and the convergence of things that there happen, what they call the polycrisis. So let me talk about some things, and I'm going to sort of jump around between Middle East and elsewhere. So this is up in Aleppo, and what's happened up there is that Iranian air defense things are appearing up in Aleppo. And so the question is, what's Israel going to do about them? Are they going to take them out? Are they going to, because now there's a very tenuous relationship with Russia. Russia's running around threatening everybody with everything in its arsenal, including, this is editorial last week in the New York Times, a brutal new phase in the war in Ukraine. There's these missiles. This is the Navy submarine Belgorod. It's nuclear powered. They have a nuclear powered torpedo. Putin keeps threatening these things. We keep sending stuff over to Ukraine. Although we say we're sending Abrams tanks, I don't know how quickly they're going to get there. It might take 2 years for them to get there. So thanks for the help, right? All this stuff is going to take money. This is from Davos, this is also in Popular Mechanics. A catastrophic mutating event will strike the world in 2 years, a report says. And they've been talking about this. They have this thing called Cyber Polygon. You can go sign up for it. I get emails from them all the time. And look, it makes sense. There's cyber attacks happening all the time. Now, is it the governments and stuff that are doing it? Our own government's doing it to us? That's up in the air. There's also this organization, this kind of showed up at the World Economic Forum. They launched a philanthropic initiative to mobilize $3 trillion a year to tackle the climate crisis. Remember Prince Charles, and it says that with trillions at his disposal. Is this where they get it? They're raising money to implement all these things. And the organization is called Gaia. Isn't that interesting? Giving to Amplify Earth Action. And our friend John Kerry went out and listen, I have to listen to the whole thing, okay? So you can listen to 30 seconds, and this is maybe 17 seconds, and this is what he says. This is what we need to put together this program. Here we go.
Well, the lesson I've learned in the last years, and I learned it as secretary, and I've learned it since, reinforced in spades, is money, 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 money.
Okay, I think John Kerry knows that. He's doing this. Israel poll for support for two states hits new low among Israelis and Palestinians. And our government's pushing a two-state solution. And there's all kinds of things going on in Israel right now, pushing the two-state solution. This is the Saudi foreign minister at Davos last week on an interview with, I think, CNBC about what he says about what needs to be done.
True normalization and true stability will only come through giving the Palestinians hope, through giving the Palestinians dignity, and that requires giving the Palestinians a state. Okay, give them a state. So in Israel, over the last few days, there's been a lot of things going on. For example, the U.S. and Israel engaged in the largest military exercises, joint military exercises that they've ever done over the last few days. CENTCOM, our Central Command, and Israel, it involved naval ships, involved submarines. I mean, it was a big deal. Aircraft carrier, airplanes, jets, all sorts of things, and even a number of B-52s. Here's some B-52s flying over the Mediterranean. In formation, you can see Israel here below. Juniper Oak is what this was called. Netanyahu said this shows our unbreakable alliance.
Here's another one. This relates to the war in Ukraine. The M1 tanks that we have in inventory right now, our armor is too top secret to even send to Ukraine to help them out. Here's some more B-52s over Israel. Here's a satellite shot over the port, the Ashdod Marina down there that you see. This was an interesting article. You can go to the Jerusalem Post. It was published on Friday. It was either in Friday's paper or today's. I think it's probably in today's paper. And somebody wrote a story about what happens if we make a strike on Iran. And they called it, and so this is what the guy chose for his title for Ilan Chaim, or Chaim, or whatever how you would say his name. Operation Wrath of God, a hypothetical Israeli strike on Iran. And is there going to be a strike on Iran? I can tell you that there are indications. For example, this is from Iran International, which is a sort of an anti-regime news site. Iran says small drones attacked military sites, but it was probably more extensive than that. Here's some videos of the what happened. And you can see that this happened yesterday. And here's one more. So the usual explanation in Iran when something like this is happening is a household chemical plant caught fire. Those are refineries, those are factories, those are military installations. And the question is, who's doing it? I just got an update from Wall Street Journal. Just came out at 10:48. So this guy must have been listening to the last part of my sermon before he published this. Israel carried out a drone strike targeting defense compound in Iran. As the U.S. and Israel look for new ways to contain Tehran's nuclear and military ambitions, according to U.S. officials and people familiar with the operation. So the other day, Amir Avivi, who I know, gave a he gave a 42-minute talk on is war with Iran imminent. I'm going to play a little bit of this. I'm going to play maybe 10 minutes because I think what Amir had to say was important. And he was talking about what's going on. What do we need to do? We have this Iranian problem. And so here is General Avivi on a webinar. He's with the Israeli Defense and Security Forum, speaking Tuesday.
Looking at this new government that started now and is dealing now with the judicial system, and everybody's talking about that, and everybody's focused on Judea and Samaria. But I must say that for Netanyahu, for the government, Iran is still the number one mission and issue, looking at the existence of the state of Israel for generations to come. As we speak, we have a huge drill going on now, the biggest one ever, between the U.S. in Israel, between Central Command of the U.S. and the Israeli army. They are training on a scenario of attacking Iran. So what we are seeing is very, very interesting. We are seeing that on the ground, looking at the IDF, looking at the Mossad, looking at the CIA, looking at the Central Command that is in charge of all of the Middle East, and the preparations for a possible operation in Iran, everybody's getting prepared. Things are happening on the ground on a scale that we haven't seen before. On the political level, things look a bit different, and I would like to outline what is happening now. We are witnessing an historical moment of change that basically started almost a year ago with the Ukrainian war. And this change is a buildup of a military coalition between Russia and Iran. CIA in December already released a statement talking about this phenomena. And I'll explain why this is happening, but what we're seeing is a front, it's a Russian-Iranian front. One thing we see it in the Middle East, but we also see it on European soil in Ukraine, and this is backed up by the Chinese economy. The Chinese are not really integrated in this front, but certainly they're supporting it economically. Why is this happening? Why this is happening now? I mean, yes, the Russians and the Iranians for a long time they had good relations, never anything remotely to what we're seeing now. So really, to understand what's going on, we need to go back a year ago. Russia, for a very, very long time, for 2 decades, has been preparing to invade Ukraine, to take areas they believe they belong to them. And Russia made a lot of preparations, and Russia knew that the West is by far superior, talking about technology and military. The US military is bigger and stronger than Russia, China, Iran, all of them combined. US is a $20 trillion country. Russia is 1.7. Iran is 1.7. So it's a completely different scale when you look at NATO. So much power, zero willingness to use it, zero. And the Russians know it.
So he goes on to see. So if you want to link to that, email me. The quality wasn't that great. I recorded it. I haven't seen on the IDSF website or YouTube channel yet, but I have it on a private part of our YouTube channel. So if you want to see the whole thing, it's about 40 minutes long. But Amir says this is a problem, but the United States could do something, but they don't seem to want to. And that sentiment was echoed by Caroline Glick in her article that was published. When was this published? January, on Friday at jns.org, titled Juniper Oak, the JCPOA, and Zero Surprises. And she says, the Financial Times reported on Wednesday that the US, EU, and UK believe that there are no credible alternatives to the JCPOA. And so she goes, so what do we see? We see this big training. Netanyahu said this exercise expresses the unshakable strategic partnership between Israel and the US and constitutes an additional stage in building up Israeli military strength. Israel will always defend itself with its own forces, but of course welcomes the deepening cooperation with our greatest ally. Caroline says this, given the US's actual policy towards Iran, like we don't help with the revolution that's going on. We won't put in sanctions because that was a Trump deal. We want the JCPOA to come back. This is our government, not those of us who are thinking. So she says, given the U.S.'s actual policy towards Iran, Israel will always defend itself with its own forces, was the most important phrase in Netanyahu's statement. The great distinction between Netanyahu and his successors is that Netanyahu never subordinated Israel's actions in Iran to U.S. approval. Bennett and Lapid surrendered Israel's independence of action on Iran as soon as they entered office, when they committed to a policy of zero surprises to the Biden administration. She's exactly right. So the question is, what's going to happen? But something needs to be done. Now, Jonathan Spire has a great article in Friday's Jerusalem Post called IRGC Under the Spotlight. Western attitudes to the Revolutionary Guard are hardening, though the action, though direct, decisive action remains elusive. And he concludes the article with this. The Ukraine war is perceived as the key threat to the U.S.-dominated global order in the West. The growing alliance between Tehran and Moscow, which the war has produced, places Iran squarely on the opposite side from Western European countries in a conflict that directly and deeply affects them. The time of the West's indifference to the IRGC is over. United and decisive action against it, however, has not yet begun. But then there was this report, I said, of the drone strikes that are now attributed to Israel, as reported just a short time ago in the Wall Street Journal. Israel is in a bit of turmoil. So the other day, Israel went into Jenin, which is a terrorist hotbed in the north, I think it's up in the northwest part of Israel, what they call the West Bank, Samaria. And they were going to take down a terror operation, and they met resistance, and they killed 9 terrorists. And of course, what happened? Well, they had a closed-door UN Security Council meeting on Friday to condemn Israel unanimously. The 15 members of the UN Security Council, which would include the United States, condemned this action. And I think the people, whether you agree with Ben-Gvir or not, the people in charge of security, like, what are we supposed to do? These guys are planning terrorist operations, so we took them out. And it's interesting, the condemnation of Israel came, I think, the same day that the U.S. took out a terrorist in Somalia. So who's right? Then this happened. This is no delay in response to Jenin massacre. Zionists pay heavy price for Jenin massacre. What happened was that a guy went into Shabbat to a synagogue in the East Jerusalem, the northern part, up towards Ramallah, and shot and killed, I think it's 9 people now have died. Terrorist attack. One couple was there. They've been married. They're fairly newlywed. I think they're in their 40s. They came running to help, and they were shot and killed, point blank, by the terrorist. And of course, this is the picture of the terrorist in the Tehran Times. Jenin's revenge by the son of Quds. And the Biden administration wants to do something with these people? Are you kidding me? It's insane. New York Times has a big article this morning too, and then the next day in Jerusalem, down near in Silwan, near the city of David, 2 Israelis were shot near the ancient city of David, or above the ancient city of David. Now, I don't know if this makes it unsafe to go to Israel. I'm not sure I would say that. These were targeted attacks by the Palestinian jihadis. And I don't have the picture of it, I apologize. In Nablus, and I've been to Nablus, the streets are pretty wide in Nablus, in many places. Big refugee camp there. I have video and pictures of people out on the street distributing candy, celebrating, cheering the slaughter of Jews in the synagogue in East Jerusalem. This is who the United States says Israel needs to make a 2-state solution with. I just think that the tensions have, Israel's heightened the alert level to, I think, the highest level that it's been in quite a while. Israel's society itself is in a bit of turmoil. They have this judicial reform that's running through the even this article in Friday's Jerusalem Post, who wants civil war? Tens of thousands of people out protesting. You know, anytime some people that lean to the right get into power now, it's the end of democracy. It's the end of society. It's the end of culture. It's the worst thing that ever happened. And everybody protests and takes to the streets. And so the current controversy is a number of things. Look, there are some things going on with the coalition that make me uncomfortable. They split the Ministry of Defense into two groups, editorial in today's Jerusalem Post, I think, or Friday's, saying don't split the Ministry of Defense between a man from the Likud party, Gallant, and Smotrich, who wants control over Judea and Samaria and the defense. And so everybody's upset. Everybody's fighting with each other. And then there's been this package of judicial reforms that have been put in place. And so everybody goes, oh, you're going to ruin the economy. Everybody's going to withdraw their investments in Israel because, you know, you're making these judicial reforms and you're taking control of the judiciary. You're taking away their discretion. Look, this has been going on in Israeli society for like 25 years. It's the same debate we have here in the United States. How much power do the judges have? And how much should they be restricted in what they can do? And so the Israeli judiciary system, and there have been American law professors that have criticized what's going on with the Israeli system for decades. And now there's a government that wants to do something about it. It's the end of democracy. And listen, I have friends who say this is just terrible what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away the power of the judges. But I think you can make a case that maybe they're just trying to restrict this. This is an article in the Jerusalem Post, Why Christians Care About Judiciary Reform. And there's another article someplace by David Weinberg. Let's see. It must have been one of the slides that disappeared. David Weinberg wrote an article in Friday's Jerusalem Post. He's associated with IDSF, Israeli Defense and Security Forum. And he says, look, there are things that we have concerns about in the judiciary, so let's sit down and talk about it. But they don't want to talk, they don't want to compromise at all. They want to just destroy the Israeli government. And so, you know, I think that right now there's a pretty big coalition that Netanyahu has assembled, but I don't know how long they'll hold together. And so we could be heading for new elections in Israel. And then at the same time, there's this concern. Netanyahu went to Jordan this week and met with King Abdullah about, you know, we need to kind of ratchet things down on the Temple Mount. Ben Gvir come out and says, well, I don't work for Jordan. I work for the Israeli people, and I live, you know, and work in Jerusalem. I work in Jerusalem. I live in Hebron, and so I'm going to go to the Temple Mount whenever I want. And that's got everybody upset. And so this is, you can see that giving away the West Bank and the Jordan Valley would be just absolute insanity. So it appears that the problem is irresolvable. And it's one of those things that I think there's something coming. I don't know when, but something's going to be done. Is there a big war first? Is there a war with Iran? Is there a war with Syria? Does Russia get involved? I mean, there's a lot of things going on, and they may or may not be prophetically significant at this point. I think they are. And we'll just have to watch and see. So I will do a midweek update this week, assuming I can fit it into my schedule. I did have some work come my way, so I spent a few hours doing something the other day that I didn't expect to do. So didn't expect that day when I started to spend a few hours on something. So that happens. So I'll put something up if I can. But we live in very interesting times. So we have this, again, to recap, we have this prophetic singularity. Everything seems to be moving towards a conclusion. How quickly is it going to happen? I don't know. A lot of people in the world talking about 2030. Big, big changes. And I haven't even begun to scratch the surface with you on all the stuff that I talked about that's going on, that went on at Davos. They have a lot of plans for you and I, not a lot of which I think we would like. So you own nothing, you'll eat your fake steak, and you'll be happy. It's very interesting times. So listen, make sure your heart's right with the Lord. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Pray that you will bless us this week. Give us opportunities to share the gospel with people, and always keeping our eyes fixed on you as the author and finisher of our faith. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.